Welcome. Today we will talk about the leader of the Impressionist movement, Claude Monet. He was born in Paris in 1840, but when he was 5 years old, his family moved to Normandy. Here Monet started to show an interest in nature, and he spent his childhood along the beaches, gaining intimate knowledge of the sea and the shifting Norman weather. When he was 15, he went to study drawing with a local artist, and started selling caricatures that were carefully observed and well drawn. But his life as a painter did not begin until he was befriended by Eugene Boudin, who would encourage Monet to develop his techniques, and especially, Boudin taught Monet the art of en plein air. Up until that point, paintings were always executed in the studios, but painting outdoors enabled the artist to better capture the changing details of weather and light. Women in the Garden is one of Monet's first paintings. He used his future wife Camilla as the only model, and the aim of this work was to discover how figures could give the impression that air and light moved around them. We can see, in fact, the sunshine filtering through the foliage, creating light and shadows on the women's dresses. In 1859 Monet moved to Paris to study. However, instead of choosing the popular École des Beaux-Arts, Monet attended the more avant-garde Académie Suisse, where he met fellow artist Camille Pissarro. His studies were interrupted by a call to military service in Algeria, where he discovered the African light and colors. He then went back to Paris and attended the studio of Charles Gleyre, where he met his friends Renoir, Bazille and Sisley. The group would regularly paint together in the forest of Fontainebleau, and they would become the first Impressionists. They rebelled against classical subject matter and embraced modernity, creating works that reflected the world in which they lived. This is Luncheon on the Grass, named after Édouard Manet's notorious painting. In contrast to Manet's masterpiece, Monet's painting was an unprovocative representation of a group of fashionably dressed picnickers in the forest of Fontainebleau. A perfect example of Impressionism. To escape the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, Monet took refuge in London, producing many scenes such as Westminster Bridge. This simple, asymmetrical composition is dominated by a layer of mist which creates a dense atmosphere, and really gives the impression of a typical foggy day in London. While he was in London, Monet produced nearly 100 views of the Thames River. Returning to France after the war, Monet and his friends continued their efforts to protest the salon system, and organized their own exhibition in 1874. This became known as the first Impressionist exhibition. Not only was their subject matter new, but the way they portrayed this reality was unique as well. Intuitive feeling and the essence of spontaneity were impressed upon the canvas. The word impressions had already been used to criticize their works, but Monet officially gave the movement its name with this painting called Impression, Sunrise. During the 1890s Monet implemented his method of producing works in series, each representing the same motif under different light and weather conditions. One of his first series is Gare Saint-Lazare, a collection of 12 paintings, depicting the smoky interior of this railway station in varied atmospheric conditions and from various points of view. Monet spent the rest of his life in Giverny, where he purchased a house which became his primary inspiration for the last 3 decades of his life. He created a Japanese garden for contemplation and relaxation, making a pond filled with water lilies with an arched bridge. He famously said, "My garden is my most beautiful masterpiece. I work at my garden all the time and with love. What I need most are flowers. Always. My heart is forever in Giverny, perhaps I owe it to the flowers that I became a painter." Claude Monet will always be remembered for being the initiator, leader, and unswerving advocate of the Impressionist style. In his works he did not try to reproduce a scene faithfully as examined in detail, but rather attempted to record the impression that a momentary vision of the scene gave him. He certainly managed to do that, and though it was derided by critics early on, it continues to fascinate audiences around the world today. So, do you like Monet's style? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel.